I really hope people hear this, especially like for me, it's also about creator method too, because I would say that probably a third of our members, they haven't started yet. And their whole thing is like, I can't get started. You are such living proof. You literally did it on a laptop on like a makeup table.
I didn't care.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
And I could have taken more care.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, hindsight's 2020.
Well, I mean, you ended up in the right place. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
I hit up like 200 like relatively famous
in an automated way, like in a mass kind of email that made it look like it's personal.
Correct, because again,
I'm
a salesperson.
Yeah, beautiful.
But so I got Grant Cardone, Guy Kawasaki, and Anthony Scaramucci, who was Trump's director of communications for 12 days before he was fired in the first term.
Okay, guys, stop. I want to make it clear what you've done. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rise Podcast. You know, this shit's getting more and more casual, which I'm really enjoying. I'm really enjoying the fact that I've taken this pressure off myself of having to have guests in all the time. And I'm simply, you know, when I have either friends or people that I meet who become friends on the show, I just find that this is great. And I think that actually I'm pretty certain that we're going to increase the frequency again. And the reason I'm saying that isn't because I'm going to try to professionally produce. It's because I am so blessed with the fact that I have a steady flow of just new and incredible people coming into my life. With that said, this is not a new and incredible person. This is simply an incredible person. This is Scott Clary. Scott, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good, dude. Thanks for having me on.
You know, this was a kind of a long time coming. So you and I are buddies, and it's awesome that we are both from Canada, from the former glorious country of Canada. We won't even get into that today, but we're both from Canada, and we didn't know each other in Canada.
No, and we were probably maybe 10 to 15 minutes away from each other too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which is funny.
And we only met when we got to the promised land of the United States.
Exactly. Escaped Canada.
We escaped Canada. Yeah. Well, you were silent when I made that just now. When I made that sarcastic remark about the former great.
I was going to say the great socialist country of Canada.
Yeah. I didn't know. Maybe you were sensitive about it.
No, I'm not. I can't wait till Trudeau's out.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. You and me both.
But you know what's funny? It's been like a sliding scale. So I think that when I first hated Trudeau, it was when he first got into office.
Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah. Right. No, my thing. I've always been pretty open about this. I don't care if you're left or right. It doesn't matter to me. I have friends who are super liberal, super conservative, aka Democrat, Republican. But I've always found that Trudeau's not a great leader. There are much better liberal leaders in the past.
Absolutely.
That's my biggest issue with him. But when I first held that view at the beginning, it was a very unpopular view because I think when he first got into office, he was young and he was like the good-looking, fun, the good-looking, fun prime minister.
He's a handsome guy. He's handsome.
And that always is like, that's not a reason to elect somebody. But now, if you don't like Trudeau, you're actually in the majority. And actually, as we're trying to keep this evergreen, but it's been happening for months now, but he's like on the precipice of leaving, hopefully.
Oh, it's very,
but he keeps hanging on.
Well, hold on a second. Depending on when you're watching this, today is September. I can't see so good. Today, no, so what am I talking about? Today's December. I don't know. Dude,
it's you lose track of time in Miami.
No, you know why? Seasons. You know why? Because I looked at my watch and it says 19, and I know that I associate 19 with September because it's Valeria's birthday.
Yes.
So I'm like, no, it's December. So look, it's December 19th. The latest thing, and like this isn't a political podcast, but the latest thing is that he's been like asked to resign. So other members of the Canadian government, of the Parliament, and everything, people are asking him to step down. We'll see how it goes. But
the point is the mass exodus from Canada, and that's how we met.
Yeah, and so and that's interesting. Well, hold on a second. Let me tell people like who the hell you are. You're not just like my buddy on a podcast. Like you actually do important shit, right?
So once in a while, I try.
Yeah. So it's just easy with Scott because we can get into shit because we're buddies, right? So, okay, I want to read kind of what I put together for you so people can understand kind of the context of who you are and why you're here, besides the fact that you're my boy. So, today we have Scott D. Clary on the show who has truly mastered the art of scaling influence and impact. Scott is the host of the Success Story podcast, a show with over 22 million downloads, ranked as the #1 entrepreneurship and top 10 business podcasts globally. He's built a social media following of over 2.5 million followers across multiple platforms with his insights on sales, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Scott's expertise has been featured on major platforms like Cheddar, Amazon Prime, and Hulu, and his career spans helping countless businesses scale with precision and strategy.
I like that.
So
it's a great intro.
Yeah,
it is what I do, though.
You're kind of a big deal. You're kind of a big deal, my friend.
I try.
Well, listen, I mean, it's been a while. How long have you been doing this?
So the podcast, that's sort of the current thing, 6 years.
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good, man. In 6 years, for you to have scaled as much as you have, that's a big deal. How many episodes do you have?
700.
So what's the math on that? So you're doing over 100 episodes a year.
Yeah, correct.
So you're doing on average a little over 2 or about 2 a week.
Yeah.
And how is it keeping up with that pace? Because that's no joke.
Yeah, so it's a good point. It's quick growth. I mean, some people grow quicker, some people don't. It's good for me. I'm happy with it, but it's a lot of marketing. So a lot of, I think my success has been me leaning on my marketing background, content distribution, very similar to what you do. One podcast gets turned into a million different pieces,
Sure.
whether or not it's short. But it's a machine. It's an absolute machine. And I mean, from a business perspective, from a scaling perspective, I built systems and processes so that it's not me doing everything all the time. But it's very purposeful growth is the best way to put it. It's not just ad hoc. So you find something that works, great, but then I'm tripling down on it and making sure that if one episode works and I put a lot of energy and time into researching and prepping and bringing on the guests, that episode's going everywhere. And my whole audience is getting inundated is the best possible word with clips and newsletters and tweets and graphics and bringing up old library and putting it into my feed as well. So yeah, I distribute a lot, which is I think very important.
How old are you?
I'm 34.
You're 34.
Yeah.
So you're still a young guy. So you started this when you were in your late 20s.
Yeah.
All right. So take me to I want to dive deeper into kind of what your podcast is about. Although, like I did read it, and I think people get an understanding. And
you
of course,
were on it,
and I was on it. I was on it, yes. And I mean, people can definitely take a look at it. I want to dive deeper into that, but before we do, how does one get to the point where they're doing this? So I want to take it like further back to like young Scott, and when he was like kind of deciding what to do. So I want to know kind of what your background is, how you started out, and what was the pivotal moment that you did this? Because I just want to point something out before you tell the story. It's one thing to say, and it's kind of the obvious road to be like, I want to be an entrepreneur. You start a business, you invest your own capital, you maybe raise a little bit from friends and family, but this is still a business. It's just now it's become kind of mainstream where people understand the concept of podcasters. People at large understand that podcasters make money, how and when they monetize, what the different models are. But back 6 years ago, it wasn't what it was today. And people didn't understand.
And the reason why I started it wasn't to make money either.
Okay.
So if we go way, way, way back, I know you were always very entrepreneurial. I wasn't, because my family was super risk adverse. So if you go through my dad, he worked for the government. He worked for CSIS. My mom worked for universities, took time off.
Sorry, can you back up and explain to people what CSIS? I know, you told me this story, but
CSIS is Canadian Security Intelligence Services, basically a blend of FBI and CIA mixed into one organization.
Your dad was a spy.
He was a spy.
Is it okay for you to talk about?
Yes, you can talk about my dad.
We're not in danger?
I'm not in danger. No.
The RCMP is not going to break down our door for divulging secrets? Okay.
No.
The RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for the Americans. They're like our serious police force.
They're serious. Actually, so he worked in government. He actually worked for the RCMP for a period of time. And it's actually
he was a cop. He was a fancy cop, your dad.
He was a cop. So he was cop at a federal level.
Yeah.
And then he moved into counterterrorism at a federal level. That was his career path.
Okay.
So all government. It was, in terms of employment, stable, but still like risky, but not risky as in you're going to get fired. Risky as in
you're going to get killed.
You're going to get killed.
Yeah, I got it.
Very different kind of risky. But in terms of career, very stable.
Like you work in government, you work your whole life in government. And a lot of his career informed let me explain why I looked at what he did and I realized that it wasn't going to work for me. So what my dad did, he worked for government. he is drawing 2 pensions right now in his retirement. So he's drawing a pension from the RCMP, and he's drawing a pension from CSIS.
Okay.
And pensions can be, for easy math, 70% of your best year. So say he made $100,000 that was the most he ever made, for illustrated purposes. Say that he made $100,000 for 5 years in a row, he'd make $70,000 until the day that he dies, when he retires at 65. And you do that twice, you're making $140,000 till the day that you die. Pensions only really exist in government anymore. They don't really exist in private. They used to exist in private as well. There's
the kind of the Canadian pension plan.
There's RRSP contributions, and in the US you have 401k contributions.
Yeah.
That is never going to be as good as just paying you money until the day that you die. Anyways, the point is, so very early on I was realizing that, okay, if I want to work for government, that's fine. But if I want to work for private, if I want to work for anyone, then I have to find a way, because I'm not going to get a pension. I'm not going to have the same security that my dad did. And also my mom, she worked for Ottawa U, University of Ottawa. Also pension, but outside of that, you don't get many pensions. So in my mind, my push towards being more entrepreneurial was, I need safety. To me, working a 9-to-5 in a company that did not take care of you when you were 65, 70, that was not safe. That to me was setting yourself up for success. And I think a lot of people are going to wake up working 9-to-5 W-2 jobs, and they don't know how to invest, and they haven't saved enough, and they're going to find themselves working in something they hate till the day that they die.
Right.
And I think that this is one of the first generations that is currently dealing with that idea, if your parents worked for a company, because your parents probably have a great pension. So a younger generation, you're kind of effed. You're kind of like, can I swear?
Sure.
Yeah, you're kind of fucked. So unless you figure out how to invest, how to save, and have this big bucket of money when you're going to retire. So I had this idea very early on that following the exact path that my dad did, it wasn't really fulfilling to go work for the government. I didn't want to be a cop. But if I want to work in private, if I want to work for a company, I better be making a shit ton of money. And that was what, just to sort of like summarize my career, was work for private, work in tech, try to make money there. When I was working in tech, I moved to a small tech company in Toronto that was acquired by private equity. That was my first exposure to exit and ownership and multiple and EBITDA. And I saw what the founder of that company made on that exit. And that was a light bulb moment for me to want to get into entrepreneurship and not just work in tech. So it was the stress of me not knowing how I was going to feel safe and secure my whole life that pushed me away from what my parents were doing for a living into something that most people would consider entrepreneurship to be higher risk. I find having absolute ownership over the work that you do, the money you make, and your future is actually the least risky thing that you can do.
There's different ways to look at it. So I both agree and disagree with you, because as an employee, your kind of worst case scenario is that if you lose your job due to, I don't know, restructuring, like a downturn in that particular industry for that particular business, you have a period of time where you can then get another job. Right? You can't get another job. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, and by the way, I've experienced this personally, where your shit goes to zero for some reason or another. I've had businesses, more than one, that have gone to zero.
1,000%, yeah.
Of course. And being in tech, and it's like at that point, I just, first of all, thank God that I had made money from before and I didn't squander it all, which a lot of people do, by the way. A lot of entrepreneurs do, especially when they're young. But I had some intelligence to hold on to some cash. And then when shit went to zero, like I was okay. And then eventually, like we were okay, because I had companies that went to zero before I met my wife, after I met my, throughout. And that's the thing with tech. It's not like,
But the skill set you build is the most future-proofing skill. Let me explain it different. To counter that point, if you work in a company your whole life and your retirement plan is contributing to your 401k, first of all, 401k, in my opinion, is the biggest scam in the world. If you're putting money into a 401k, even if the company is matching your contribution, if you actually do the math, your returns are going to be less than if you just put money into the S&P 500.
Well, but hold on a second. But the 401k, I'm not as familiar in the U.S., but like
it's the same as RRSP.
So the RRSP in Canada, it's basically a deferred tax. You can still invest that money into the S&P 500.
That's a TFSA.
No. That's I have RSPs still in Canada.
Yeah.
And the money is invested in the markets. Absolutely. And I believe in a 401k, you can do it too. It's not a set investment.
That'd be like a self-directed 401k.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
and then you can just buy the S&P 500 and leave it alone.
But these are already, what we're talking about is already more advanced than what
of course.
90%
But you know what the
people are
problem
gonna
is
understand.
that I don't know about I don't know about the US, but I would assume it's similar to Canada, where people don't know. People don't know in Canada to max out their TFSA every year. They don't know to max out their RSP, which is the equivalent of 401k. And the TFSA is equivalent to a Roth IRA here.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And so to put money in there, where it's one is a tax deferred vehicle, the other one is a completely like tax exempt vehicle. You're putting after tax money in there, but the gains are never taxed, in the future on a TFSA or a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
And if you let those mature over decades, your retirement is set. So I agree with you on the concept of having a pension and having that security. How like growing up, that looked great for you, and that looked like that's something to achieve, which at the time, it was. But if people even took a little bit of initiative today and they said, okay, I'm going to maximize my contributions to, again, in the States, the Roth IRA and the 401k, and they invest even modestly over like several decades, their retirement, they're going to be okay.
I don't think they're going to be okay.
Okay, why is that?
Because most people are still living paycheck to paycheck already.
Well, they don't have discipline. They don't have the discipline to set that money aside, on each paycheck and put it to where it needs to be.
But if they do have the discipline, so we're talking about two different sets of people. So the people that do have discipline and they're investing and they put money into a 401k and they're doing it purposefully and they are compounding money over time.
Yeah.
My argument would be that there's better places to invest your money than a 401k. Because the concept of a 401k is when I take money out in the future, I'm going to be paying less tax because my taxable income bracket is going to be lower. And I'm going to take money out.
I'm not as familiar with the 401k. If it's like the RSPs in Canada, that means like in the RSPs, once you take it out, once you're past a certain age, you just take out less every year. So you can decide how much you take out, and then you'll be taxed depending on that year how much you take out.
Correct, yeah.
It's treated as income.
But what I would say what people should be doing is if they are investing for their future, because this is sort of like the rabbit hole of investing in entrepreneurship. So if you are conscious enough to put money aside, put in your 401k, and listen, I'm not like a financial expert by any means. I'm not pretending to be, but I'm just saying the thought process that I sort of think through is then if you're okay with investing and setting aside money,
then maybe there's other ways that you can invest and set aside money so you're comfortable. I think that, in my opinion, more people live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have discipline.
No.
They're trying to figure out how am I going to retire, and they're never going to retire. And
well, they're going to have to because they'll be too old to work.
Yeah, but they're not going to have the money to support the lifestyle because they have to make good investments. So just all these thoughts. Keep in mind, I'm very young when I'm having this.
How old do you say you are again? 34.
34. But I am thinking about retirement when I'm 19.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
In my mind at the time, and I do understand that you can retire with a variety of different assets that you've invested to over your life. But in my mind, at that time, it was, I want to make more money than like a 9-to-5 government job will pay me. I want to make more money than that, so I'll have this big bucket of money. And that's what pushed me into tech. It was, those are where big salaries are. And if I can make a big bucket of money that I can invest or save, then at least I can retire. And obviously my view of retirement's also changed a lot since then too. I think there's a lot of benefit to never retiring, and you can chat about that.
I think, there's definitely like a health and mental benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So that's where sort of
if you're doing the work that you love.
Amen. Yes. Yeah. But that is entrepreneurship.
Well, for some.
Yeah.
For some. Most people still would prefer not to be entrepreneurs. I don't blame them. This shit's hard, man. Like, I stress out over stuff all the time. Less lately because I feel like starting to ride motorcycles has changed my life. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true.
But you at least in my mind you have more control over your destiny than if you work for somebody else.
Oh no, if somebody hits me with a car, I'm fucked. What do you mean?
No.
Oh, you mean financially?
Financially. No, not if you're riding motorcycles.
Right.
Not if you're riding motorcycles. But regardless of how you choose to set yourself up for success and retirement and investing, in my mind, I was comfortable like jumping into my own thing.
So how did this come about? Like, how did you? Okay, so first of all, so you grew up watching your dad be a cop.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like here in Florida, it's not a big deal for people to have guns and walk around with guns sticking out of their pants. But in Canada,
it's very strange.
It's very strange. And your dad, I mean, being a member of the the police and these elite
he
forces,
still has his service pistol.
Sure, I'm sure he does. But like, I don't know, when your friends came over and your dad has like a gun in his like on his holster or something like that, like
he's not walking around in
he wasn't walking around. No, okay.
No.
But in general, like as a kid growing up, having a dad who's doing what your dad did.
It was super scary. I was super straight edge because I remember he told me, I remember this so clearly. He told me something like, if I smoke weed, he'll be able to detect it on me like a month later. Just and I just believed him.
He may have been telling the truth because that's some secret spy shit maybe that you don't know about.
You know that for office Christmas parties growing up, you know what his idea was fun? His idea of fun was? He'd take me into the office and he'd hook me up to a polygraph, like a lie detector.
Nice.
And this was like for office, like Christmas party, and I'd be answering questions about like what did I do? What did I lie about? Whatever. He was a fun guy. He was a fun guy.
Okay. Can you still get access to that polygraph thing? Because that'd be pretty cool, like to do an episode. Imagine like a podcast where people go on the show and
they've done that.
Get hooked up to lie detectors.
They've done that.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna watch that show. Okay.
I don't think you need government access to get a polygraph. I'm pretty sure if you Google, you'd find one.
You could probably do it on ChatGPT. You could probably like play a voice note to ChatGPT and say, "Tell me if this person's lying."
Soon, I'm sure.
That would be cool.
Can
you
sure
imagine
very soon.
real-time lie detectors, and you have like an earbud, and ChatGPT's recording the conversation, and as I'm talking to you,
I like that.
It'll be like, "Hey, Scott's lying to you. He's not. Imagine that. That'll happen.
That will happen, and they'll use it for political debates too.
Yes, that'll be a lot of fun. The world is going into a very interesting direction, but we'll get on top of that. But
okay.
I want to go back to kind of that aha moment that you had. So
I felt,
yeah.
And regardless of whether or not I was right, that's the caveat.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I felt that the path to a good life, and how do you define a good life? For me, it was basically benchmarking the same quality of life that my parents had.
Okay.
It was detached home. It was family, kids, not too stressed out, just like a good quality of life. Because there's another idea that sort of informed how I look at career and what I want to do with my life. The second idea was, and this has evolved over time, and I still believe it. If I do the same amount of work and do the same jobs that my parents do, I think my retirement's going to be shittier. And also, I don't think I'm going to have the same quality of life as my parents had. I'm not going to be able to afford the homes that my parents bought.
You're right, but that's due to, I think, poor management of the country. That's more of a political reason.
It is, but it still affects me.
Of course.
So my dad bought his first home cash in Toronto when he was 23 or 24.
Right.
Sold it and then moved to Ottawa and then bought that home cash. And that is the house that we were raised in. And it was, I can't remember the square footage, like 3,500 square feet with a pool in the back. Like,
that's great.
Awesome, right? It's government salary, cash buy. Nobody does that anymore. I mean, I can't remember what the numbers are, but if you are making less than 200 grand, you're not buying a detached home in Toronto.
Correct. And that's what the mortgage loan is paying cash when they're making $200,000 a year.
So I was upset because there was this gap, right? I think that gaps create a lot of stress. I have this perceived effort that I'm going to put into my career, and then the rewards are not matching up with the same exact effort that my parents and a lot of people's parents put into their career, and that gap was causing me stress and frustration. And I
don't blame you. I don't blame you, but also it's also I feel like a natural progression too, because the world becomes more competitive. Populations go up. Like when you were a kid and when your parents were in there kind of like, doing their thing when they were, let's say, in their 30s and 40s, it was far less competition for career, for money, for properties.
But I don't believe that that's the way. It's the way the world works right now. I don't believe that the next generation should have a harder time than the previous generation. And there's a lot that's going into that statement, and there's a lot as to why that is. But I feel like life should be getting better. You should be struggling
Life should
more.
be getting better, but I don't necessarily believe that life should be getting easier. So I agree that it should be getting better. I think as a race, we should be progressing. But I think life gets better as a result of like technology, like this whole AI revolution that's going on right now. I feel like that'll lead to a better life. Yeah. But I still think that things will just be harder. I just don't think things will get easier. I think individuals will have to continue working harder in order to achieve even the same like level of happiness that our predecessors had. I just think we're going to get better and more efficient at working. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I think that if people felt like life was easier, they wouldn't be pushing off kids till later. They wouldn't be, like, there's a lot, right? There are people that are not comfortable settling down and getting married at the same age as our parents.
Yeah,
not
for
having
sure.
Kids till later. I think depression and anxiety and stress in a younger generation are at an all-time high. So I hear what you're saying, but if it was just a case of working a little bit harder, then I don't think that all those other factors would start to come to light.
It's not just working harder, it's working smarter. You got to be like, you have to be really smart when it comes to this, like today's day and age, like because of technology and everything that's going on. I just feel like the world's become hyper competitive. Like when your parents were younger, they didn't have the world wasn't connected like it is now. So, you know, your parents were competing in their pond. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now you and I are competing in the whole world. Like, you know, we're competing with people on the other side of the world for these views and for this attention from global audiences.
Yeah.
But the flip side of it is we have the technology and now we have access to knowledge. Do you know what I find to be the biggest difference between my generation and yours? Because I'm 17 years older than you. And where I find that you have a massive advantage, because I wasn't as far along as you are now when I was your age. And I try not to use this as an excuse or like as a crutch, but the fact that you have the internet at scale at your age, the internet that I had when I was your age was bullshit compared to the internet that exists now.
Of course, but I would say that, I mean, like, I think we are both outliers in our age groups. I mean, I don't think
we're outliers in our immediate surroundings, meaning the people that you know in your network are either like the same, maybe a little like not where you are yet, or like much higher. And that's how I feel like my network is.
I feel that too. And I think that, yes, so what you just said is a good point. So the barrier to entry is much lower with my generation than yours. Barrier to entry is very low. And there's a really cool graph that I've seen on the internet, and you can Google it. And I don't know how to, I'll describe what the chart is, and if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. So it shows the amount of employees required to hit $1 million in revenue throughout history. Yeah. And it will start in, like, say, 1930, 1940, and let's, for argument's sake, say it's 50 employees that are required to hit $1 million in revenue in 1940.
It's how many?
Say 50.
Okay.
As an example number, something that's not that far from the truth. 50 employees is a pretty standard amount of employees to have $1 million in revenue in the 1950s or 40s. If you fast forward to today, it's one person. So it just shows over time the you need less employees because now we have technology, we have tools. So the point is, the barrier to entry to create and to build something, and to be an entrepreneur or to do anything interesting is lower than ever. But at the same time, the competition is higher than ever because now we're connected, to your point as well. Yeah. So I think that, yes, it's a hyper-competitive environment, but know that you've never had more opportunity than now to sort of break out of whatever it is you're doing that you're not happy with. So again, 9 to 5 W-2 is fine for a lot of people. Yeah. But I guess my call to action, my wish is that more people at least dabbled in building something themselves.
So you wanted to do it because you wanted to be...
I wanted safety and security. And I felt that there was more safety and security in finding... First version of that was a very, very high-paying job. That was my first version of safety and security. Yeah. My second version of safety and security was equity and exit. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought would be the bigger payout than even a high-paying job. Yeah. And then the third version of safety and security is complete ownership over my own life and situation. So let me build something from scratch that I control.
But sorry, on stage 2, equity and ownership, that necessarily isn't up to you. That's part of a compensation package as an employee that you hope to get by showing enough value in the company that in order to retain you, they need to give you some form of equity, and then you still need to hope that the company sells.
Correct.
Which it may or may not.
But what it's doing is it's informing my decision about where I want to work or what I want to work on. So if you are in stage 2 and you do want to have an exit as an employee, you can start vetting companies the way the VCs vet companies in terms of, where am I going to work? Yeah. How much equity? What stage are they at? What's their revenue per head? What's the valuation of their last raise? Like, start thinking like a VC when you're mapping out your career. And this means that if you join a Series D late stage startup that's raised $100, $200 million in capital from angel groups or VC groups, you're not going to have as big of a payday. These companies are not all going to turn into NVIDIA. If you join too early as employee number 1, there's going to be that 95% chance that those companies go to zero.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, so if that's your perfect situation where you're not entrepreneurial, but you still want to have potential huge upside, then you find something in maybe like a Series A manager, director position where you still have some equity, but there's proven product market fit. And then that's how you would structure your career. But the point out of all of this is there's so many different ways to create safety, security, career, become an entrepreneur, become an entrepreneur within a company, and build something within a company. There's so many ways to look at career that I think that outside of the fact that I think most people should dabble in entrepreneurship so that they can learn some of the skills associated with it, I also wish that more people would just open their eyes up to multiple different paths through life.
Yeah.
So that's really, that's my wisdom after going through all these different types of.
When you're talking about this, you're kind of, I'm kind of thinking through what I think is a great situation or an ideal situation. So like for me, I didn't become an entrepreneur because I wanted to make money. I became an entrepreneur because everybody kept firing me.
Yeah.
I was completely unemployable. Everybody just kept firing me. I was a terrible employee. I sucked. And so people would keep firing me. But now that, I've been an entrepreneur for many years, I really like employees. Like I like the route of employment, and like the way I kind of gauge it is what would I want for my kids. I've talked to people who I just talked to Odie. Odie was here. He was on my show. He was on your show, and those shows are going to still drop. And Odie's he's a very big money manager, for kind of lack of a better term, in the billions and millions of dollars. And when he was sitting where you're sitting now, and I was talking to him about the value of entrepreneurship, he was like, employment's way better. And I'm like, I was shocked for him to say that, because he's been an operating entrepreneur, and then he's somebody who provides capital again, and he funds multi-billion-dollar projects. And he said, like, he started naming some people who are like famous employees of companies who make tens of millions of dollars every year, more hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So I think it's great that if someone can insert themselves and can get into a company, because I think that once you're in a company, that company has some kind of value, they have some kind of IP, or they have some kind of proprietary systems or technology, or they have a client base, or they're doing whatever they're doing, to be able to go in and without taking risk for yourself as an employee, and to go in and to leverage your skills and your work ethic to go in and raise that company up. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but then you don't have control. But you kind of do have control, because
I think that in the right situation you have control.
You have to have a good relationship with your boss, with your employer, with the owners of the company.
Guy Kawasaki was an employee at Apple, and now he's famous. And even Steve Ballmer was CEO. He wasn't founder of Microsoft, and he's now one of the richest people in the world. How
about that guy from Google? He wasn't the founder.
Which one from Google?
He's worth like $100 billion.
Oh yeah.
I forgot the guy's name, but that's the thing is I forgot his name, but I know that there's a guy who was like really high up. He was there with Sergey Brin and with Larry Page,
but there was another like
he wasn't a founder. He was like I don't even think he was an early employee. But then you have guys like who was the guy from Disney? What was his name again? Iger. Something.
Oh, I can't remember.
I can't remember either. But these guys, my point is that these guys, they do well, and they have the security of making a ton of money, like enough money every year that they can retire and live off interest. I don't know. I'm a fan of employment still.
I'm a fan of. Okay, so I think a couple thoughts on this. So first of all, I think it depends on the season of your life that you're in, and your risk tolerance. That's very important. I think that you can be in a season of your life where it makes sense to try and build something.
Sure.
You can be in a season of your life where it makes sense to join an early stage startup as an employee and try and get a nice equity position, and hopefully they exit.
Yeah.
And there's also a season where you want none of that, and you just want to work for somebody in a very stable, large organization. So seasons of life do matter. Risk tolerance matters. I also think that if you I had a thought and I just lost my thought. It was a really good thought too. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
It was a thought about this, but I can't remember what I was.
That's okay. It happens to me all the time.
I know. It was such a prolific idea, and then
that's okay.
It was like in one at the other.
That shit happens. Look, I think with employment, I'm still a big fan, and I think that
I know what I was going to say.
Okay, tell me.
Thank you. This is like like when you like can't sneeze, then you finally sneeze. And yes. Okay, so that's it. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I have a makeup artist over there for Valeria, so if you want afterwards. But anyways, continue.
Before the party tonight.
Sure, before
we should have done
party.
it for the podcast. So
right, that would have been great, right?
Yeah.
No, but you look good.
I'll try.
You're a handsome guy. All right,
you are too.
Thanks, buddy.
So, I think that it is easier to earn an above average amount of money and live an above average lifestyle by being an entrepreneur. I do not think it is that hard to find a way to package what you know and sell it for a market or above market rate.
As an entrepreneur, you mean?
As an entrepreneur, and it's higher risk, but I don't think it's an insane amount of work to build a $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 a month business as an entrepreneur if you have a high value skill that you can sell into the market. And it's not as if you're going to build the next FANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. You're just finding a way to monetize what you know. And I think that that has a higher success rate than and higher chance of you living an exceptional lifestyle than if you were going to try and find a job that pays you 50 grand a month.
I respectfully disagree.
50 grand a month or 50 grand, yeah.
Sure, I respectfully disagree with you because I believe if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a solopreneur making $50,000 a month, you don't have a lot of moats because there's depending on what you're doing, right? I think that depending on kind of what profession you're in, if you're like, if it's you or maybe a couple of employees, you don't have like a sufficient moat. I feel that you need to have certain scale, but mind you, even people like there are companies at scale that go to zero. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that unless, for me, I became an entrepreneur out of necessity because, as I said, people kept firing me. Like I couldn't hold a job down. It wasn't my thing. But I believe that people who can be entrepreneurs successfully, people who can be employees successfully. I think that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's because you love doing it. I don't think that people should go into being an entrepreneur and working for themselves because they want to make a lot of money. Because I believe that, again, and you and I can have a difference of opinion. Like, I believe that you can actually make more money helping a company succeed and making yourself invaluable for that company than you can having your own company, because statistically, most businesses fail. And so if you're going in as an entrepreneur, chances are you're going to fail. Whereas if you enter a company as an employee, you have a much higher probability because that company is already, somewhat at scale. Or the fact that that company can afford to pay you, that means they have sufficient scale with which to pay you. They have money coming from that scale, or they've been invested into. There's been a proof of concept at some point. I just like employment.
Disagree. And that's fair. And why I disagree is because I think most companies fail. I would say there's sort of different categories of entrepreneurship too. So there's people that are trying to build an app that has no product market fit. Nobody cares about your app. Nobody wants to buy it.
Right.
If I've done a job, if I've been a marketer, if I've sold stuff for companies, if I have been a videographer, if I have done social media, I can charge $5,000 to $10,000 a month per client to do that for a company.
Yeah.
And I can do that 5 times. It's not like I'm doing something new. I'm completely red oceaning my entrepreneurship. And that's why I think that it's easier, because to make $20,000 a month as an entrepreneur, that's 4 retainer clients at $5,000 a month. You can't tell me you can't get that.
Well, that's assuming you have no costs. That's just based off of your knowledge and your own execution.
But that's trading time for
for money.
To make $240,000 in a company, you're a director or you're a VP, or you're working for a company that has a very, very stringent hiring process. I think that it's easy. I think that it's easier. And I also think that
what's easier, to be an employee?
No, to be an entrepreneur and to make a little bit more money. And I think that most businesses fail because people don't play a long game with it. I think that people put a clock on their business having to be successful because they don't de-risk entrepreneurship. And I'm not a fan of jumping all in either. I think you can be working your 9 to 5 while taking clients 5 to 9 on the weekends, and you de-risk it. And then you're not worried about paying rent or mortgage, or you're not worried about putting food on the table. And if you can do that for a significant period of time, you will build a book of business. You learn and you iterate and you improve and you build relationships. But over time, if you stick with something and you're a semi-intelligent person, you'll find a way to make money doing it. And I think you'll find a way to make a lot more than your 9 to 5.
Listen, I think you and I can agree to disagree, because I still believe that entrepreneurship, again, for me in my situation,
because you build big.
I don't need
everyone to build big.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, you do.
Well, I have. Or right now, what we do isn't big. We have 18 people. That's not, to me, that's not big. That's like that's still considered a small business. Yeah. I've just seen my employee friends, be at companies, knock it out of the park, and just do incredibly well. Yeah. Furthermore, I've seen my friends who are employees who went off on their own, and they realized that entrepreneurship the way it was sold to them by the media, and now guys like Vaynerchuk and Alex
Apparently
Hormozy
me.
and you and Grant Cardone and all these guys, right? And the way it's sold to them isn't, so I know guys who have worked in media companies that have scaled it, that were doing great, that they went on, they said, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. And they went out on their own, and it wasn't what was sold to them, by guys like you. It wasn't, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but like, and they went back to employment. Anyways, look, we can beat this topic up.
There's other ideas too that I think are interesting ideas about like entrepreneurship and employment. I think that the best employees could be entrepreneurs in a different part of their life. I believe that as well. I've seen people that have built companies and have gone back to work because they just want an income and balance, and they don't want to put in more than 40 hours.
Yeah.
I think that also understanding your personal North Star is very important. So if you want to spend a lot of time with your family and you want to spend time with your kids, and God forbid your parents are sick and you need to be going back and forth and taking care of them, that's going to inform how you make your life decisions.
I want to do fun shit. Like for me, I want to do fun shit. Like it's funny. Right before you got here, I made a post. I was recording. Valeria was over there getting her makeup done for like stuff that she's shooting around the house. And our videographer was there. Valeria's assistant was there. The makeup artist was there. And Celine, Valeria's assistant, was telling Valeria, this is what you have going on today. Yeah. And I just recorded it and I just put up a reel. And I said, and on top of that, I'm filming a 2-hour podcast. I was on a case study with one of our Creator Method members. I had a call to give direction to our team about a client. And I started listing the shit that I do. And I have this gala tonight with Valeria, and I caught myself, like, I was documenting this, and I ended up posting it, and I realized I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy this shit. And I managed to go for a ride on my bike for an hour this morning. And I had breakfast with my kids. And I drove them to school. But this takes a certain, you got to love this shit. You know what I mean? You got to love it.
That's important too. I think that's the most important. I mean, I do love what I do. And I work way more now than I did.
Of course you do. But you're talking from a vantage point of an entrepreneur, of someone who does what they do very successfully. And you're also talking from a vantage point, and your vantage point is unique because, as you mentioned, you've had 700 interviews, and you're interviewing successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's
a bias.
You have a bias, but it's a good bias. Like I'm not knocking it. I think it's great. I wanna understand. I wanna go back to kind of how you started, because it's interesting, because when you started, people were like, "You gonna do what?" Right? Just the same as you started 6 years ago. Valeria started, call it 7.5, 8 years ago. I'm always like shaky on when she started. I have to go check that out. I have to go see when her first content went up. But when Valeria started, people were like, the fuck are you doing? What is this? So how
I'll tell you the podcast origin.
Tell me, because I want to understand.
So a couple things happen. So you keep in mind, so I'm interesting because I've done all types of careers, right? I've been employee, I've been entrepreneur, I've started stuff, I've worked for people, like I've done kind of all of it. And I've just gone through this natural progression of sort of diving into the next thing or diving into a new way to make money. Right. So I've done it all. And when I started the podcast, sort of two things were happening. So at the time when I started the podcast, I was building a company, and it was a software company, and that company was eventually acquired.
Nice.
And how that deal was structured, the best way to put it was a company that acquired us, which was a large broadcast company. We had a broadcast software product, and the large broadcast hardware company called Grass Valley. It was almost like a try before you buy situation. So we were working like hand in hand with them before they actually pulled the trigger and acquired. So I knew that the acquisition was coming already for about a year and a half before they actually decided to do it. And I knew kind of what the number was going to be, and it was going to be okay, but it wasn't going to be never work again. And it also wasn't going to be like hitting Forbes. Like it was not an acquisition that anybody would ever know about outside of, our customers and maybe my mom and dad. But I didn't want to start from scratch. And at that point I would have had a small exit and a lot of sales and marketing experience. That was kind of always my job. I was always on the sales and marketing side, CRO, CMO, never product or tech or developer. And I would have to just sort of figure out what to do next. So the podcast was a couple things. First of all, that's when I started dating Gina. And Gina built My Therapist Says. And I saw how they built their business.
My Therapist Says, for those who don't know, Most people do, but I think a lot of men may not know. My therapist says is a very, very famous Instagram account with, what is it, like, how many followers?
8.2 million.
Okay.
And they are memes, mental health memes.
Yeah.
So it's like for guys, it would be the same as Fat Jewish, Fuck Jerry.
Yeah.
All these types of
Lad Bible.
Yeah. This is the kind of stuff. So Gina,
Men's humor. Yeah.
it was my better half. She built it with her two sisters, and she now has been building it for
Much better half. She's lovely.
Yeah, she is lovely. She's much better than me, like 1,000%.
That's okay. But my wife too. Don't worry about it.
And she built that with her two sisters.
Yeah.
And a childhood best friend as well. There's 4 of them total that built the company and started it, and they were making very good money doing this. And that was their business. That's their life. They post memes. They put together some viral campaigns for very big brands: Netflix, Hulu, Hinge, Gucci. Pick a big brand. They've done work for like hefty garbage bags, like a consumer brand or somebody that markets to the masses. They've done a viral campaign for a launch for them. Saw that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So they've made their whole career about media. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing was,
so that's what inspired you. It was them. I had the notion when you and I first started hanging out. And obviously, like, we met Gina and the 4 of us hung out. I thought it was kind of like you guys already met when both of you were at scale.
I didn't have an Instagram account.
I didn't know that. So you weren't doing this at all when you met Gina?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. I thought like you had gotten together and you were like, hey, like, I'm on social media. Oh, I'm on social media. Oh, okay, cool. And you guys got together.
No, she liked me because I didn't have social media.
Gotcha.
Actually, it's really funny. When we met...
Well, you have 1.7 million followers on Instagram. Does she still like you?
Yes, she does. She does. Because I use it for business.
Okay.
Because I use it for business. It's a good following.
Okay.
It's following for the right reasons. So when I met her, actually, I had no Instagram at all. I had like an Instagram, but
so that's what inspired you. So seeing
it was
her...
that. So it was the fact that the company was going to be acquired, and I would have had to restart with no name, really no name. I had a resume, no name. She built a massive audience, and also I loved watching Gary Vee's content.
Sure.
And I was looking at the stuff that he was launching, and he kept launching all these businesses against his audience. So for me, it was a very obvious. Okay, so she's found a way to make money on social. Let me find out what type of content I like, and what type of content I can create. I'm a marketer, so I know how to do the things. I know audio, video, copywriting, graphic design. I know how to run ads. I know all the stuff. I have a decent network, so I can probably get some people to help me co-create this. And that means that whatever I choose to do in the future, I don't have to start from no name. If I build something and I don't know if I build an audience, then a company I launch in the future, anything I choose to do, if I choose to work for a company, that's going to be a net positive for them because I'm going to have this audience that comes with me. So it was just let me future-proof myself. And that was it. And then the type of content, podcast was, well, I can't do memes. I can be kind of funny, but I can't be funny like on demand. They're very good.
Yes.
Gina's very good.
Yes.
I want to create content that I enjoy creating. It doesn't feel like too much of a lift. So let me find a way to do that. That's a podcast. Conversational, long form. And that was what started it. And then you apply your years of marketing wisdom to the podcast, which is a product. Yeah. And you find a way to not only create it, but distribute it everywhere, just like you would if you were selling any other product in the world. And that's really what I've done.
And so you did that. And so talk to me about kind of those early days. Like talk to me about episode like 1 to 10.
So episode one, I think the guy who came on, his name is Mark DeGrasse. He's a really nice guy, and now we're friends. But I just ran a campaign on LinkedIn to anybody that was CMO, CRO, because the first version of the podcast was actually called Sales versus Marketing. And then I changed it to Success Story after. Because the first version was just talking about the stuff that I like talking about, which was me actually discussing content and ideas that I was dealing with on a day-to-day. Yeah. So the guy's name was Mark DeGrasse, and it was just the first guy that replied back to an automated like DM campaign on LinkedIn saying, yeah, I'll do your podcast. And I think that he thought the podcast was much bigger or older than it was because he was like going into these like deeply personal things. And like,
you know what I'm shocked by?
I respect the hell out of Mark, and he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I had no idea how to react. He's talking about his son and all these health issues. I'm like, bro, this is my first
You know what's
one.
interesting? It's interesting to me that, okay, so I really want to make a point to the people who are watching, especially to the young people who think that you don't have what's required to start something. You didn't go to your personal friends. You didn't go to like you didn't go to your network of people, and I'm sure you knew successful people, to be like, hey, listen, like, to be really transparent, I'm starting a podcast. I need a first episode. Would you be that person? You went to like the kind of like the world at large and be like, hey, do you want to be on this podcast? You probably put together some materials to make it look cool.
Exactly.
Why didn't you go to, again, to me, it's really interesting because
I think when I started it, I think I was a little bit embarrassed about starting it. And I didn't want to bring my own circle into it till I knew that I could prove out that it was good.
Okay, so I'm different than you. Like, I'll take the first person. You know who my first guest was?
Who?
Valeria.
That was your first guest?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. That makes sense. But I mean,
but you didn't have but you had Gina.
I had Gina, but I didn't.
You had her sisters too.
I could have.
Yeah.
I could have. I don't know.
But look, my point is that I think it's a really important kind of lesson for everyone who's watching, is that you don't need a ton of connections. You can literally start from nothing. And like with Creator Method, like, we have our members now, and I'm on calls with them like pretty often, and I'm digging into it. And I feel that now there's a certain kind of people who want to get into this. They fall into kind of two broad categories. They're like you, or it's just like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I can do this, and like you did whatever it took. Like,
I didn't care.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
And I could have taken more care.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, hindsight's 20/20.
Well, I mean, you ended up in the right place. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. But it's interesting because there are other people in the other camp. So one camp is you, to be like, you look at it, whatever, it's easy, man. I'll just do a thing on LinkedIn. Yeah. Whoever's going to come, I'm going to come. Or I'll call my wife, or I'll call my friend, and we're just going to sit down. We're going to rip a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the one episode. I'm going to show it to somebody else. Hey, look at this awesome episode. Do you want to be the next
Exactly.
one?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's that school of thought. And then what I'm seeing is a lot of people be like, like, I need a place to shoot. I need to buy $20,000 in equipment. I need this. I need all of this shit. I had.
I mean, you can go back and look at the first one. It was full suit.
Yeah,
It was like pandemic, so I had long hair, so like my hair was like kind of like slicked back a little bit, like a little bit more, because I had a little bit of it was like a gross little hockey hair mullet.
Do you have a mullet?
Yeah, a little
that's
bit.
Good.
It was pandemic.
No, that's cool though.
Yeah.
It was your pandemic mullet.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And it was we were in a condo in Toronto, close to Yorkville, and it was so funny because Gina, every time because we were together, is when we started dating.
Yeah.
And this was actually after we started dating, because obviously we moved in together. And every place she's ever lived, she wanted like one room to be what she called a cloffice, which is like a closet and an office built into one, with like the full like closet with all the bags and the shoes and stuff, and then like the nice lighting. And I was relegated to a corner of that room. And I was just sitting with like a laptop on her vanity facing me. And obviously you can't see her vanity or all her bags and shoes, but it's a laptop on her vanity facing me. And it's just like it's like the one white wall that we have in the condo that doesn't have anything else on it. And that's where I started my show. And that's the only.
And you did it all remote.
All remote when I started, yeah.
But I just love, I really hope people hear this, especially like listen, for me, it's also about Creator Method too, because I have so many people. I would say that probably a third of our members, they haven't started yet. And their whole thing is like, I can't get started, and you are such living proof that you literally did it on a laptop on like a makeup table or whatever the hell that thing is. You just
vanity.
Right.
How do you not know what a vanity is?
I don't know, dude. Because I'm a man. How the hell do I know what a vanity is?
I mean, I've only just moved it 1,000 times and set it up. That's how I know why.
No, I understand. See, that's the difference between you and me. When Valeria asked me to move something, I said, we got to call the handyman. We got to call a mover. See, I'm always delegating that shit.
Now I do that. That's much smarter.
Listen, we're at a point now in our relationship where she knows not even to ask. She just goes directly to the source of the people who can move furniture.
Gina's almost there.
No. It's not her fault. It's your fault. You just haven't set the expectations that you're useless. You got to set the expectations that you're useless. Okay? There's certain things that you're good at, and those are the things she should come to you for.
Yeah.
The other stuff, the stuff that you don't want to do, even if you can do them, you got to make it seem like you're useless at them, and then you'll never have to do them.
I like that. That's a good strategy.
It's not something I'm going to teach my children, but I'll share it with you.
Listen, we've moved so much in the past couple of years. I don't mind that at all. That's good life advice.
Yeah. Well, just don't tell Gina that I told you. Hopefully she won't watch this podcast and give me shit. I think she would probably like murder me if I got you into riding motorcycles, but that's a whole different thing.
She will.
Yeah, that's okay. So you're not going to be riding motorcycles because I want to live. So that being said, look, so again, I just really want to point out that what you've done, I think, is just, it's so incredible, the fact that you've built this. And like, dude, you have a big podcast. Like when you walk into a room, I just want everyone to know for context, like I'll come to an event where you're speaking, and you'll be on stage and shit. And I'll be like, in the back doing my thing. And when you get off stage, it's like, they just swarm you. Everybody wants to talk to you. Everyone wants to talk to you. They either want to get your advice. They want to pick your brain, the pick your brain situation, which I get that too sometimes. Everybody's like on top of you. They want to be on your podcast. They want to get on your podcast. I see the people you have there, and you've built something to the point where, your brand, when I mentioned that you're my boy, people are like, whoa, wow, really? And I can see already, they were like, can you get me on this podcast? Like, I already see it. And I've only brought you a very small handful of,
very good. Very cool
good.
People,
I'm very selective who I introduce you to.
Yeah.
But so look, I mean, it's amazing. And tell me about like, give me a couple of examples of some like memorable guests who had you just blown away with their story.
Yeah. So again, sort of coming back to how I started the show, it was just taking massive action and a little bit punching above my weight when I started the show. So what I did when I started is, I can't remember how I found this tool, but it was like either a tool like it was some sort of like web scraping tool. I can't remember what it was. And I found a way to put together a list of like really famous business people, and I just scraped the list of business people, and then I found it was like what's that is it Duck Soup or something like? There's like some sort of like automated tool that if you have a list of people, it can find you their email address. There's like a million of these.
There's a few
now.
of them. There's like Rocket Reach. There's like a few.
There was Anymail Finder. Anyway, now there's probably a lot.
And so
of
you
them.
just hit them all up.
I hit up like 200 like relatively famous
in an automated way,
people.
like in a mass kind of email that made it look like it's personal.
Correct, because again, I'm
beautiful.
a salesperson.
Yeah, beautiful.
Good subject line.
Yeah,
high
wonderful.
open rate. Usually get about 30-40% open rate. Doesn't matter.
Well,
what
you're also not asking them for like money. You're asking them. You're flattering them and saying, hey, look, I'd love to have you on as a guest.
Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
Guy Kawasaki. And Anthony Scaramucci, who was Trump's director of communications for 12 days before he was fired in the first term.
Okay, guys, stop. I want to make it clear what you've done, and
this was in the first like 10 episodes. I was not ready, bro.
I know, but it's beautiful. Like this story is a masterpiece because you've like the names that you're mentioning. These are very influential people. These are people with huge accomplishments, but also their own respective audiences.
Yeah.
And you simply. Like, call it what it is. You're a dude who went, you made a list, you automated, you shot it out, and then you're getting all these people, and they're like, yeah, we'll do the show.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you have this clout of having all of these people. You then kind of directly or indirectly get access to their audience.
Yeah. You
align your personal brand with theirs, and all of a sudden, like, you start getting scale. And it's such an example of the... You know that saying, I think it was Gretzky saying, like, you miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
But
you miss
like,
100% of shots you don't take.
Right, but you weren't just taking shots. You got like fucking 3 machine guns and started firing like crazy.
1,000%, yeah.
Right.
And then the second one of those people comes onto the show, they're in the email sequence going out to the next 100 people.
Of course. And this is, so many people don't understand this. I want to quickly interject with like a personal story of mine.
Interject away, bro.
Yeah, so I had this like in 1999, I started an online restaurant directory. Back when like people like I had to explain what the internet was. I was walking into restaurants, and I remember like in early 2000, like maybe in Q1 of 2000, I made my first sale, and I walked into a pizza by the slice place on like some dirty part of the Danforth.
Yeah.
And those from Toronto know what I'm talking about. And it was literally like the slice was like $1.10. It was like Canadian, like it was nothing. It was free pizza. Like this wasn't like a sophisticated client, but he was like this nice dude, this nice older man. And I came in and I was wearing my suit and tie, and I sold him. It was $59 for the year. There was a listing, Canadian. It worked with tax. It worked out to $63.13. I remember the invoice. And he bought this thing from me, and I took, and this is like a further example of what you did, but you did it in the age of technology, and you actually used your brain, unlike me, which I just used my fists. I was just going hard. And I went in and I sold this guy this ad for $59 plus tax, $63.13. And when he bought from me, and I made this nice ad on my, on the website, and then I went to every neighbor. I didn't do a radius search on Google. I used my shoes, and I walked to all of his neighbors. I said, hey, you know what? Gus over there, he just bought the shit from me. He bought an ad on my website. They're like, a website? I'm like, yeah, it's a website. It's on the internet. The internet? And then so I built that business, ended up like 10 years later, we were making millions every year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that led to my daily deal site, which I did like, you know, a raise of $32 million. I had an exit there. Like, my point is that stupid little thing that I did from that spawned, like, you know, it really got me on my path. But the way you did it as compared to what I did, like, you did it in such an efficient way, and what you've achieved in 6 years using ingenuity and technology. And I'm not just, by the way, I'm not saying that you were able to do it far better than me simply because you had the technology. No, I honestly think that you're smarter than me. I mean it. No, I mean it. Because I'm like an idiot going door to door, knocking on doors, trying to get one guy to pay me $59. You're shooting off hundreds of emails at a time through an automated. I would never have had the wherewithal to do that. So I'm just like, I'm commending you.
I appreciate that. And I think, but the lesson is, like, you just start and you just start doing. I mean, there's even the Paul Graham quote, do things that don't scale, then find a way to scale them.
Yeah.
I just skipped the do things that don't scale part, but I still was just doing the basics. Like,
it's the basics.
To me, it's the basics because, again, I was fortunate to come from a sales and marketing background.
Yeah.
So how do I close a customer?
Well, you weren't fortunate. You earned those positions too.
Yeah. I worked for them. I understood them. You apply that wisdom to the next thing you do. This is and how I would close a customer was the same way I closed a guest. And there's other things now that now the podcast has gone to the point where I'm not seeking guests; they come to me.
Well, yeah, I would think so. Yeah, because every time they put up a list of business podcasts, like number one, sure, yeah.
But I'll talk about like even like some more useful strategies for people that are looking to connect with cool people. But one of the companies that opened my eyes to entrepreneurship, it was the one that was acquired by private equity. It was a small telecom IT tech company in Toronto that I worked for a period of time, started my career with Bell Canada. Mm-hmm. And then I moved into the smaller company. I was leading sales and marketing there. That was acquired by private equity. That was like my first light bulb moment into ownership and equity and exit. Anyways, the whole point of that is that the founder who started that company started it in the 90s, and he sold to private equity for a lot of money. But the point is, how he started that company was he was walking, I can't remember which street. It was a street in Toronto. I can't remember where exactly.
Yeah.
And he would just go business to business, walk into the business, say, hey, I want to sell you this telephone system. We just sold a Nortel telephone system to the guys next door. This is a deal I can give you, and it will replace your existing equipment. We can finance it. But it was him, door-to-door sales. And he built, it was an 8-figure company.
Yeah.
And he built that just by going door to door and knocking on doors and selling himself. And that's how we started it.
But with you, I would assume that a lot of this kind of methodology you're now applying to the monetization of your podcast. Correct. Because you have sponsors.
Exactly.
So now, I mean, you had your first set of, call them clients. They weren't really clients, they were guests. So you were able to leverage kind of your method of that kind of asking at scale, bringing them in, brand building, aligning your brand with their brand by having them as a guest, having those deep conversations, honing your skills as an interviewer. You were able to do that, and then once that got scaled, then you started getting interest from sponsors. Of course, yeah. So do you use a lot of that same kind of method where you get one sponsor and you'd be like, hey,
of course.
Hey guys, look, you see this guy who advertised with me? Here's kind of his data, not his data, but like, here's the results that he got. Here's the benefit that he got. Would you want to advertise? And now you're scaling that site. You scale the monetization.
It's the exact same.
How long did it take you from your first guest to your first monetization?
2 years.
Okay.
2 years.
So people should buckle up, right? People should put their heads down.
Buckle up. And also, I probably monetized my show in the least efficient way possible. So if I was going to redo it, or if I wasn't, keep in mind, when I started my show, I was building a business. So I wasn't concerned about like, how do I monetize this immediately?
Right.
I was focused on the business. If you have a product or service, you can monetize in month 2. But I'm selling eyeballs.
Correct. So you need to get the eyeballs first.
Get the eyeballs first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that if you're selling anything, if you're selling an opportunity for somebody to come onto the podcast, or if you're selling an opportunity for an advertiser to sponsor your show, I mean, it's sales 101. You have to understand the pain point. What are they trying to achieve? Why can you solve that pain point? Why can you be sort of the antidote or the thing that is going to solve whatever their objective is? And then also not just solving a pain point, which is sales 101. The X factor in closing deals quickly, getting guests on quickly is something called intent. So what is intent? Intent is really, is there a reason in their life that they need to get this problem solved within the next 3 months? What do I mean by that? In terms of guests, what does intent look like? Well, intent is usually I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
I'm launching a thing. I need to have publicity around a launch at a specific date. So what do I do for that? I would go on Amazon. I go for up and coming, new releases, business category, rank most popular, find the authors, which are like big business names, hit them up, say, hey, I have a podcast. I know you're writing a book. This is what I'm going to do for you. I already know you're doing PR.
Yeah, beautiful.
And they're going to say yes 99% of the time.
Of course.
With advertisers, are they sponsoring other podcasts?
Yep.
And then that's the intent. You know that there's a budget allocated and there's a time when they have to spend it by. It could be end of Q1, it doesn't matter. But if you see them start advertising with other podcasts or other brands or other creators or other influencers, you know that they have the objective of spending money that's been allocated to influencer marketing or podcast marketing.
Yeah.
There's intent there.
Yeah.
So what that does is you're not having to warm them up to the idea.
For sure.
They're already willing to go
Are you
into
able
it.
to comment on kind of what the split is between inbound interest for advertising on your podcast versus your outbound?
Right now, it's 100% inbound.
It's 100% inbound.
Yeah.
So my speculation.
So just now, I'm building out a sales team, like as we speak.
To go outbound.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and you and I should compare notes on that. I'll be happy like when you do build that outbound team.
Yeah.
I
have one guy right now.
Right.
And he started like a month ago.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I bet, and this is something that we actually teach like with Creator Method, and this is something that we've really put into practice with Valeria is, people are always asking me, especially at really early stages when they have really tiny audiences, everyone's like talking to me about monetization. And I said, stop talking about monetization. You should be focused on, and I believe this is what you do very effectively, focus on the content. Because if the content is good, we always found with direct relation that when content would hit with Valeria, it's like, it's cyclical, right? And sometimes we have more views than others depending on how the content's hitting. But when something hits big, influx of brands, influx. So I would always tell creators, don't worry about your outbound strategy is creating content, good content that does well. So keep honing your skill, increase your frequency of content, content production and posting, create better content, engage with your audience. Forget about going outbound. So you probably saw that early and you understood like the bigger profile guest you get that'll generate more views, all of a sudden your inbounds go up.
Correct. Yes.
And I think that's the secret sauce that a lot of people in this business, they don't get yet when they're trying to monetize.
I think that, listen, two things can be correct at the same time. So can you make money going outbound? Yes.
Yeah.
But most creators, podcasters.
Inefficient though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you only have so many hours in a day. So again, I probably could have made the argument that I could always be running outbound campaigns to potential advertisers because I know how to do it.
Yeah.
I know how to find decision makers. I know how to find brands that are advertising on other podcasts. Then you can make the argument that, yeah, Scott, you should have been doing that. You should have been doing that. You should have been ripping those lists and setting up campaigns and pressing go. I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but it's only very recently that I've only been doing the podcast and not building another business while doing the podcast. So only so many hours in a day. And I think that if you are most creators spending the majority of your day focused on outbound and not focused on getting better at your craft is a waste of your time.
Yes. Amen. I have this conversation with our members all the time.
I fully believe that.
I didn't go outbound. Like when I say it was me who kind of pulled the trigger on the whole outbound campaign with Valeria until years into it. And the only reason we did it, it wasn't even to increase sales. It was to have a better control of the flow, right? Because we wanted certain advertisers over others. I don't know. We wanted to target certain advertisers.
Yeah, I understand. And I think that then you can make an argument for like you can negotiate on your terms and you have like a little bit of understanding of your pipeline and you can forecast a little bit more.
That was also the main reason too. It was being able to forecast better because when you're relying because the thing is that with content, as you very well know, with every episode you put out, whether it's the long form that you're putting up or when you cut it into short form, you cannot control. You can't even predict how the content's going to perform.
Yeah.
In some cases, you kind of get a feel for it, but realistically speaking, it's hard to make that everything hits. So you're dealing with kind of these ups and downs on the content performance, and the content performance is directly how the content performed directly ties into the inbound interest from advertisers.
Yeah.
So how the content performs directly is related to your revenue at any given time. And so for us, one of the reasons we went outbound is that, our sales continued to scale over time, as I'm sure yours do too, but it was kind of lumpy in that we couldn't predict when it was going to come in. Correct. And therefore, the cash from those deals would come in because a lot of the people had terms, which now we've tightened up. But
oh yeah, so brands will mess with creators all day doing net 90 terms and stuff like that.
Yeah, you gotta.
And then you have another big business problem, which is cash flow. If you have a team to take care of and you have expenses,
Correct.
and that's a whole other thing that can.
That is a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
I find that we're getting kind of into the weeds of kind of the whole creator space, which, it's that the challenge is that smaller. I don't like the term smaller creators with smaller audiences. Because there's no, you can't call somebody smaller. They're not small.
No, they're all just creators. Yeah.
They're all creators, but some of them have like larger, more reach, and some of them have lower reach. So creators with smaller audiences, because they don't have the wherewithal to stand their ground and demand. Demand kind of both in terms from a rate perspective and terms. What happens is brands, rightfully so, take advantage of it, and like they'll say, "Well, we'll pay you in 90 days," which gives them a superior cash flow situation. Yeah. Right. But it makes it hard for creators to operate. But then over time, I'm finding that brands are understanding now because we just started turning people away, and they're like, "Okay," and
I think that So I also think that just to finish up the thought on that last point.
Yeah.
As a creator, the business you're building is to put great content and attract eyeballs. If you want to build a business where you have to go outbound, you don't need to focus on creating content. You can just have a product or service and go outbound.
and then go outbound.
So you're not.
But that's not this business.
No, you're not leaning into naturally the advantage that you have as a creator, which is getting eyeballs for the content you create. So the product is actually the sales strategy.
Right.
The product is a sales strategy.
In the case of...
And you just remove as much... Listen, in business, it's all about energy management, time management. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be successful, there's a million different ways to build a business. There's a million different ways to monetize as a creator. I think that it's really important that you lean into the thing that stresses you out the least, distracts you the least, doesn't just leach your energy. And that is just not only putting out content, but putting out content. You get inbound, not only by putting out content, acting as a sales strategy, you're also putting out content, which is making you become better at your craft. And another thought about like sort of the rationale for just mostly focusing on content and not focusing on other stuff as a creator. All creators will have to go through this really awkward phase of putting out really subpar content before they get to the point where they understand what good content is.
Of course.
And I think that trips a lot of people up because they don't want to put out something that's subpar and they don't want to put out crappy content. It's required. Like 100% of creators. It's not like 80% of creators have to put out crappy content before they get good. 100% of creators, if you go back, I don't care if you go on Instagram, you go on YouTube, find a way to go to their first post. Yeah. It's not going to be great.
It's not. No.
It's really not going to be great.
Well, great is subjective, right?
It is. It is very subjective. I mean, but the point is, you will never be as comfortable. Yeah. Like there's psychological reasons outside of just production value that is going to inhibit the quality of your content.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like I tell creators all the time that, they'll be like 3 months into it and they have a couple of thousand followers, and they're talking to me about, well, I have to I have to change, I have to pivot because if I do a video like this, it performs like this, I get this many views, this many followers, and they're so deep in the metrics that even like 1,000 followers, and I say to them, stop. The views and follows and likes and shares, that is not your success metric today. Your success metric today is putting out content. Yeah. Your success is the experience you're gaining. You're in school right now, and it's the experience that you are gaining by creating content, by putting up content, the time management, the honing your skill, being able to speak better, all of that. So I agree, but that's something that people are learning and people are getting better at it. I think that
you have to be okay with sucking.
Yeah, sure you have to, but that's with anything.
Agreed.
I suck at most things.
I agree.
Dude,
so why do people...
you know how scared I am riding these motorcycles? Like I still suck at it. I'm only 8 months into this.
So,
but I will be good at it.
I know you'll be good at it, and you're not bad at it.
I'm okay. I'm okay at it. Slow speeds are difficult, but that's a whole other thing. I want to say something about podcasting. And one of the reasons why I love podcasting as a business it's like from as a content creation business, is because of the efficiency of it, right? Like if you have content that can be conveyed in like conversationally, like you and I are talking now, the fact that you and I can sit down for however long we're going to sit here, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and we can have a conversation. The audio goes to multiple audio platforms like Spotify and.
You want me to tell you my breakdown?
Well, I
can
think
if you want.
No, I think I have an idea, right? So the audio goes to audio, the video goes to YouTube, and you cut it into reels, and so you get so much utility
and newsletter and tweets.
And now with AI, you take the transcript, and AI can make all this stuff for you.
Yep.
No, it's wonderful.
But that was also, I was thinking that way when I started because I knew that, again, when blank slate day 1, day 0 really, I was like, okay. I don't want to be thinking of new concepts across every single platform every single time. Now, there's a positive and a negative to repurposing. By repurposing, it'll never be optimized and the best content for every platform.
Like in terms of I understand.
But can it be good enough to achieve the objective, which is the main thing?
So I kind of disagree with you, and I say that knowing that you've done 700 episodes and I've done like 50. But I kind of disagree with you because I believe that a lot of those optimizations isn't up to the talent. I believe the optimization is in post-production. So I believe if you have because I've seen both, right? I've had external editing teams. I've had now we took everything in-house for Valeria, and it depends on the team who does it. That the post-production could be. It can feel native.
So we are very into the weeds on this, so that's fine because it's a smart audience. So when I said what I just said, I was comparing the majority of people's like derivative so when you create a podcast, say you have video content and you use an editor, you use a tool like Opus, you use a combination of editor plus, which is an AI tool for clipping videos.
Opus is great,
you can use a combination of both, which is what I do. Usually, most editors are not good enough to take a clip from a podcast and make it perform as well as if I had scripted a video for TikTok or I'd done some sort of challenge for whatever, okay? So more often than not, it slightly underperforms content that's created natively for the platform. But there's in post-production, there's a couple strategies. First of all, if you have a really great editor and they find the most prolific points of view in the conversation and they can edit them in a way. Also, another strategy is if you have a conversation like this and I say something, but you need a good hook, well, you can re-record after I leave asking the question that ties right back into this really spiky point of view that I have. That's another way to do it. So yes, there are ways. I think that we're talking about people that are super deep into the weeds and have figured out the perfect team versus somebody who's just starting out, who's trying to figure out why their content that they record scripted talking head is overperforming.
It's iterative, man. It's like you gotta keep going with it. But I think that your viewpoint is like obviously super valid. But it's like for your type of content, like the business, the long form conversational, I tend to agree with you that you have to do it so that it'll perform natively, like when you record it. But like for Valeria, we've pulled out parts of vlogs that have gone crazy super viral. And like we do it pretty often. Like we can pull out stuff from like 6 years ago from when we're messing around with the kids in one of our vlogs and clip it in such a way that all of a sudden, but there's also another, again, we're getting really deep into the weeds, but when you've built that personal brand over time, at that point, your success rate is a lot higher because if I pull out an old video from 6 years ago when my kids were really small and it's like a funny little piece and we put it now to Valeria's audience and to a smaller degree my audience, the people who are watching now, they have the context of the last 7 years. So those aren't just random kids messing around. Those are the kids that grew up in front of their eyes and that they have the context of like all of the events that happened from that moment.
And that's why they're engaging.
Right. Yeah. And I would argue that even like for your type of content, which is just, it's far more straight to the point and it's like, it's not like this family stuff, but for your content, I also feel like if you were to go back into your old stuff and you were to pull, which I'm sure you do all the time, and you were to pull and add additional context, because it would be cool for you. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing, right?
I like it. No, it's the brainstorm.
I'm just kind of spitballing. So if you had a guest, let's say, who was on your show 6 years ago, and that guest, since being on your show, has experienced some massive success, and they've hit some like big milestones, it would be interesting for you to kind of narrate a hook in the beginning, like in like, maybe, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, saying, so this person,
I asked this person, blah, blah, blah. And
this, and now, like, kind of
I like
making that little storyline, I think would be really interesting. So like, you had me on your podcast.
Yeah.
And in 20 years, when I'll only be in my early 70s, assuming that, we continue on the trajectory that we're going, you could say, yeah, I talked to Gary 20 years ago. And
is what we talked.
That would be cool.
About. That is the cool thing about podcasting is you get.
And you'll only be 54, by the way.
I will only be 54.
Yes. You'll be still a young man.
I'll have a couple more grays.
That's okay.
You
can join the club. You can join the club.
I'm already getting grays, actually. I was looking.
Shut up. Stop. People like you in your age who complain about getting old, like you're just implying that I should commit suicide because like I'm on death's door.
No, bro.
You're a young man. Don't worry about.
You're gonna live to 120.
Thank you. Don't worry about your gray hairs. You're good.
What are we talking about? Trying to think.
It's easy to get off track.
It is easy to get off because this is a problem. When you know the person, then you just shoot the shit.
Why is it a problem?
Oh, I know what I was gonna say.
I love the way you always come back. You forget. This is the second time you've done it, and I appreciate it because it's like suspenseful. You forget. I'm like, was he gonna remember? And then he
I always get
delivers.
it. I always get it. It's also been a long day. This is the second thing that I've recorded today. It's also very it's very draining to record. It's very draining. I think that people sometimes
they underestimate
how much it.
Well, people think Valeria just prances around all day and does nothing.
No, it's very draining to perform.
To
put on and
I
to
agree.
be 100%. But I was gonna say the advice that you're giving about can you find in post production the right clip?
Yeah,
I think that advice is great for somebody who has help. So there's a difference in advice that I give for somebody who is solopreneur versus somebody who has a little bit of help and support and has a smaller team. Because again, you have to think about what's the value of your time. So is it worth spending 2 hours on a reel, or is it worth using Opus and getting a 75% of the way there result and having slightly underperforming content? It's tough.
You know what the thing is that even when you do have the team and if you have all this infrastructure, it's still going to be 75% of what you would. I feel as an entrepreneur, you have to come to terms with it. Like there are certain employees, certain team members I've had, like even before this company, that it took years to get them kind of to align with, and it's not a matter of them succumbing to the way I want to do things. It's a matter of two people coming together and coming up with the most kind of efficient and best way to do it. I would pick to get things done at 80% of how I would do them myself over doing them myself. I'd pick that every day.
I have an interesting idea that we can talk about. Because I've had a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want to hire good social media people for my team.
Yeah.
And I never have an answer for them because I think about how much work I put into building my team and how much effort and energy and how many things I had to teach them to get them to be
because
good enough.
Because you're in it. You and I are in an industry where, especially like 6 years ago to date, there is no real formal training. Only now the colleges and universities are
creator method
or creator method. Well, that's one of like the premise for us is like we're now working with like colleges and universities, and they're saying we understand that there's going to be a whole workforce developed to support creators directly. So but to your point,
the best people, they go and do it themselves, or the people that can do it, the creator seems to have to train them. I don't think there are people floating around that are. I don't agree that
the best people do it themselves. The best people.
No. I mean, if people know how to create audiences.
But that's the thing is doing the actual execution. Like you can be really good at the creative when it comes to like post production. You can be excellent at that, but for whatever reason, like you're so good at that, but you're not great at sourcing guests. You're not great at networking. You're not a good salesperson, so you can't. Do you know what I mean? So to me, I'm a generalist, and I think that's why we kind of like things progress. And Valeria's, she's got her hands in everything too. I think that there's an emerging group of people who are going to be extremely successful, helping people build personal brands. I'm sure Vaynerchuk's got like 50 people working on his personal brand.
But what I'm saying is, in the workforce in general, there are not a ton of people that kill it at building personal brands just floating around looking for employment. I think that more companies, especially if you don't have massive budgets, I think more companies should at least learn the basics themselves, or some CMO should learn the basics themselves.
They're hiring people like me to consult them now.
I know that because it's very hard to find somebody for $60,000 a year that's going to kill it on.
Yeah.
I mean,
even
look
for
at
more.
Duolingo.
Yeah.
Duolingo is the one example that I look at as somebody who actually has a marketer that understands social. I mean, maybe a couple others. There's a couple brands on Twitter that are like a little salty, like Wendy's and stuff like that. They're
Bro, brands are kind of, they're in a bad situation. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I got these bikes, and I look at Harley Davidson's marketing.
Didn't they almost get canceled for going?
They almost got canceled for. That's a whole other story. But that's a whole other story. But when I look at their content on social, I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is so. You so don't have an understanding of who your audience is. You don't have an understanding how to create content, long form, short form. And I mean, this is just one example, but like, their entire brand is in the hands of content creators who love the brand because it's like a 150-year-old brand. It's a legacy brand. So you have all these creators reviewing bikes, talking about everything to do with the kind of the biker lifestyle. But Harley Davidson doesn't control any of that. So they're not working with content creators. They're not doing, I actually put a pitch together that I had our director of partnerships on Valeria's team reach out to say, hey, listen, like, we just bought 2 of these bikes, and these are like their most like recent, bikes, to say Gary and Valeria should be creating content for you because because of our age difference, like, I'm the demographic of their rider.
Yeah.
And we want to introduce this hobby or this sport to Valeria's audience.
That's smart.
You know what I mean? And we'll see. I don't think they've responded yet. We'll see. But my point is, to your point, most brands, they don't have an understanding of this, but they're gonna have an understanding because when they're gonna start,
they're gonna have to.
They're gonna keep losing to these small independent brands. Where you were sitting, I had Michał Bursky. I think 5 years ago, he created a company, Curlsmith, and he's an ex P&G, like Procter & Gamble executives, and he created this from nothing. He raised $75,000 from 2 guys. It took him like 8 months to get $75,000. He had no money, and 5 years later, he sold it for $150 million in cash to Helen of Troy, which was a huge conglomerate. He did it exclusively on Instagram. Like, do you know what I mean? And
that's so fast.
Because he understood social. It's very fast. And that's the thing is, to your point, these brands don't understand. But when they're going to be in a situation where their only choice is to keep acquiring these social media brands, they're going to be like, shit, we have to learn how to do this.
Because what's going to happen is they're going to acquire them, and then
they're going to drop it because they won't know how to keep the brand alive.
Yeah. And then it's going to be a huge waste of money.
A huge waste of money.
Okay, what else do you want to talk about?
I think we're good, bro. Is that your like subtle way of saying, Gary, let's wrap because I got to go?
I have no idea what time it is. Gina's probably mad because
but here's what I like. With Gina, all you have to do is tell her you're hanging with me.
I know.
I feel like I think I don't want to like, toot my own horn, but I feel like Gina likes me. And
she does like you.
Yeah, she does. So that's the thing. You just got to tell her I'm with Gary. Don't worry about it. Do you know why? Do you know why she likes me?
Why?
There's only one reason. You know why? Because she figures if he got such an awesome wife, that must mean he's a good dude. That's what it is. That's how women operate. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I think
that's totally fair.
That's what it is.
And I think that she respects, like, listen, you have a beautiful family.
Thank you.
Beautiful kids. And I think that this is a non-entrepreneurial, just like life advice. I think that you have to spend a lot of time around people that you want to emulate and mirror how they build their life.
Listen, I don't know about emulate and mirror because like everyone's happiness is kind of, I think, very individual. But
I'm talking about our happiness and our life.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just think that like it's really interesting because I feel like a man is like, especially like when he's already like paired up with his partner, a man is really measured by kind of his partner. Like if you have an amazing spouse, like as a man, you're just, and I'm not even talking about if they're like beautiful and smart and all that. If you just have like a really good, like your wife is just a really good person, it just reflects so well.
I agree.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make that power move when I proposed to Valeria. That wasn't my intention. It worked out that way.
Yeah, because good people attract good people.
I agree. Yeah. And hence you are on my podcast and I was on yours. I'm really glad that you live really close now. I remember when you and I first met, you lived far away. And we had to change that. I made a point to like nag you until you moved closer to me.
I'm happy we're down the street now too.
Yes, you are down the street, but you still have to come over and do cold plunge more often. You did it a couple of times.
I did, and then life got busy, and then I started traveling a little bit, and that's sort of that's a good problem to have.
It is. It is.
But now we're back.
But I'm getting a second cold plunge.
Why? Oh, you're getting the one that's less cold.
I'm getting one and I'm setting it less cold for women and children. So you'll have the option to use the one for like men and the one for women and children.
Okay, so you can't make that joke about me because I've always gone in the exact same one that you have.
You're a champion. You are because
I see your stories And I know that there are guys that come here that don't go in it.
Well, they'll go in it for, you know who I had? I had my buddy Miguel. He was my personal trainer for like
there was one Jack dude.
That's Miguel.
He like screamed and jumped.
Like, yeah,
Poor guy.
It was hilarious. It was hilarious. And he's a jacked young guy.
Yeah.
He's super healthy. Yeah, and he couldn't take it. Anyways, on that note, Scott, look, I really appreciate this. This is awesome. I'm hoping we're going to do like a part 2 because we did a really deep dive into content creation. And it's interesting because, you know, this podcast was meant to really talk about, you know, people's success and their businesses and their story. And I just see as like this global trend that things keep coming back to content creation, and content creation in the form of like building a community, figuring out these platforms. And that's really it's such a now a necessary path. So I'm really happy that you and I have found ourselves kind of in the right place at the right time.
And it's not just for individual creators. I mean, I'll give you one last example, if it's cool, just for people that are listening to this and they're like, okay, so I know that influencers exist, but how does this impact like the large companies? They're just going to try and find a way to figure out social. Not just figure it out. Large companies will have to become media companies. And I see this happening with HubSpot. HubSpot's been a sponsor of the show, and they supported the show almost now. I was going to say since the beginning, not since the beginning, since it was like a decent size, so about 4 years. And what HubSpot did, HubSpot's always been ahead of the curve. And of course, yes, definitely I am sponsored by HubSpot. But as an organization, I respect them for their marketing chops. They built their entire company through content.
Yeah.
And now they are a $34 billion market cap company. They started with blogs. Any business term that you ever searched online, a HubSpot blog would have the answer to it. And now they started their media network, which is acquiring or investing in podcasts, YouTube channels, newsletters, basically any creator that is business, they're investing into it. This is how they built their publicly traded massive corporation. This is how they're going to continue to grow. So you see proof points in some of the fastest growing, most culturally relevant companies in the world that are doing this.
Yeah.
And I think that just shows that, whether or not you're an independent creator or you have some sort of influence in a large company, you have to find a way to figure out how to get into this game.
I agree with you, but I believe it's not because they don't want to or they don't believe in it. It's because they don't know how.
Yeah.
You can figure out the mechanics. You can figure out how to put together content. You can figure out how to shoot and edit and produce, but you can't figure out how to really connect with people at scale. Correct. That human connection is what I think a lot of these companies are lacking, and they try to hire for it, and it's just too difficult to do.
Agreed.
And that's why people like yourself and people like Valeria, that's who are the kind of current and especially the future rainmakers that these companies are going to have to rely on more and more to establish those connections.
That's why Creator Method exists.
That's why Creator Method exists, and we will see it scale to infinity. Sir, thank you for being here, Scott. I really appreciate it. You have to come over with Gina for dinner and Sana and Cold Plunge.
You got to come over and see your new place.
I've seen your new place because I was at your podcast studio.
Valeria has to come over.
Valeria's going to come over. We're going to do it up. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure.